When I was little, I was picked on quite a bit in school, mainly because I had these two front teeth that stuck out really far. And kids had a lot of really fun names that they would call me in school because of that. The other reason that they made fun of me was because I loved to tell people that my mom was a butterfly, and that at night she would turn into a butterfly and go out in our front yard. She turned into this white butterfly that would roam through our front yard. And I would tell them that because there were so many nights I would get up in the middle of the night to use the restroom, and I would look out the window of my bathroom and I would see her walking through our front yard in her white bathrobe, praying, and she would be walking with this white bathrobe that had these long, kind of flowing sleeves, and she would be walking with the Lord because she couldn't sleep, and she looked like this giant white butterfly in the moonlight. And so I would tell people that my mother turned into a butterfly at night, not realizing that she was just spending time with Jesus, walking through the yard. But in thinking about some personal things to share about my mom, there's a few things that came to mind and some stories that, if it's all right with you, I would like to share very quickly. My mom, she taught me the importance of a few things. She taught me the importance, and she still teaches me this. I don't want to talk about her like it's a funeral and we're talking about her in hindsight. She's still teaching me these things. She teaches them to me every day. I feel so privileged that I get to travel and minister with her. It's the best part of my life, really. I love it. She has taught me from the time I was a child the importance of seeing people. The importance of seeing the world, really, but the importance of seeing people. The importance of looking at a person and not just seeing what's in front of you, but seeing what's beyond what's in front of you. I'll never forget one of the earliest memories that I have of traveling and ministering was going to this church deep, deep, deep in the mountains of somewhere in, North Carolina, the Appalachian Mountains. And I remember hearing whispers of the congregation while we were setting up, hearing whispers of people wondering if the man from the mountain was going to come to the service. And people were terrified if the man from the mountain was going to come down from the service. They were talking about this grotesque, disfigured man that might show up, and everybody was scared of him, and he was this horribly disfigured, scary, stuff of nightmares person that everybody was afraid that if he showed up, it was just going to run everybody off. And I just, as a kid, you're hearing these like horror stories, and I'm thinking that I'm going to be afraid and I'm going to have to go back out to the bus and, just stuff of nightmares. And I'll never forget sitting in the service, sitting on the front row, as you do when you're the minister's kid, and I was probably 6, 7. And I remember my mom singing, and as she did, she would be walking around, and it was a very small church, and so she walked off the stage and was walking through the people, and she started laying hands on people while she was singing, and in walked this scary mountain man. And everybody gasped when he walked in the room. And he wasn't a scary mountain man. He was a man who was incredibly disfigured. It was the saddest thing I've ever seen in my life. His face on one side, I kid you not, hung down to his waist. He had one eye on this side, and the other eye, I kid you not, was down here. And it sort of moved while he walked. And everyone was just moving away. Like it was like he was demon possessed or something. And I watched my mother walk right up to that man. And she put her arms around him and she said, "I'm so thankful you could make it." And as a kid, I looked at him, and I'll never forget the picture. That eye that was all the way down here started crying. And in that moment, it wasn't like there was a miraculous healing, that his face suddenly became whole again. But I watched an entire congregation hit their knees. Because in that one act of seeing and showing compassion, she showed those people what it meant to love. And I'll never forget that. You know, a lot of people look at her and they see the big hats and they see the makeup and they see the funky outfits and they think, oh, Reba Rambo is so glamorous, and she is. But I've never known a person more willing to touch people. I've seen that woman wash the feet of people that most church people would call unlovable, would call untouchable, would call unforgivable. And without a second thought, she's gotten on her knees and washed their feet and said, I beg your forgiveness on behalf of the church because we haven't known how to love you. I've watched her walk into infectious wards without gloves or a mask and say, I'm bringing the healing power of Jesus with me. I don't need that stuff. Because if Jesus would touch you, I'm going to touch you. That's the kind of person I want to be when I grow up. I can't tell you how many times I've woken up in the middle of the night at their house. As a kid, as a teenager, gone downstairs to get a drink of water, and I hear weeping and wailing, and I'm like, what is going on? And in the middle of the night, someone had shown up that needed prayer, needed deliverance, needed something, and they knew whose door would be open. And there she was, loving them through, walking them through. That's the kind of woman she is. Yeah, she can do all this, and it's awesome. But that's the Reba that not everybody gets to see. And that's the 60 years that I get to celebrate. This is a woman who has taught me crazy faith. Like, yeah, I've watched her believe God for, like, y'all, this world is like planes. Y'all believe the Lord for planes. This is a whole new thing for me. Like, Brother Copeland, Pastor Nancy, planes. It's amazing. I'm believing the Lord for planes now. I've never believed the Lord for planes. It's a whole new thing. For me growing up, it was buses. Like singing Southern gospel music, it's buses. We all prayed for buses. And so I've watched that woman pray for buses my whole life. I've watched her pray for buses. I've watched the Lord bring buses. So I've seen that kind of financial breakthrough faith. But I've also watched that woman believe for other crazy kinds of faith. This is a wild story. We, on our bus, I was like 10 years old. Someone convinced her that we needed a dog on the tour bus. A dog. And someone also convinced her that we needed a Jack Russell Terrier on a bus. If anyone has ever had a Jack Russell Terrier, you know those things are wild beasts. They have so much energy, and putting a Jack Russell Terrier in 45 feet of space is a bad idea. But we got Tigger, the Jack Russell Terrier, to live on the bus. And one night after a church service, the pastors had taken us out to a Chili's. We're all eating dinner with the pastors at Chili's. The bus driver goes out to the bus to check on something. He comes back in and he's like, hey, Tigger is acting crazier than usual. Something is wrong. Turns out that Tigger had gotten into the bus driver's pack of No-Dos, which, if you don't know what No-Dos are, they are essentially caffeine pills. Tigger had eaten 6 of them, which is the equivalent of 12 cups of coffee. And she had also eaten a giant bag of Doritos and a couple other things. Like, she had just gone on a binge. And so we go out to the bus, and Tigger is running laps around the bus. And so we all go out there. Tigger's freaking out. We call our vet. The vet says, get the dog to drink peroxide, make her throw up, get the dog to drink peroxide, she throws up, doesn't help. The dog dies in the parking lot of Chili's. Just, Tigger is gone. In comes Reba with her crazy faith. My mom scoops Tigger up, and like Simba on Pride Rock, she starts parading Tigger around, screaming in tongues, calling on the name of the Lord. And I'll never forget, she goes, God, I know this dog is a terror, but she's our terror. And the Lord brought that dog back to life. She lived to be 19 years old. And the funny thing is, that's the first time she resurrected that dog. That dog died again when she was 16. That's a whole other story. So crazy faith. I watched that woman believe for crazy things. And yeah, so I learned that, you know, the Lord even cares about the crazy dogs that eat no-dos. And the Lord must really love her to bring the crazy dog back. So I learned that from her that it really is nothing too crazy to ask the Lord for. So I'm grateful to have someone to paint such a crazy example that, you know what, the Lord really does care about the things that affect us. He really, really does. He really does. The last thing that I want to say, and then I'll wrap this up because I know it's getting late and everybody's getting hungry. The last thing that I will say that has probably been the greatest gift she's ever given me is a love for words. From the time I was little, I learned how to read at a really, really young age. Like, learn to talk, learn to read kind of at the same time. And I'm so grateful. She never treated me as a little kid with a little learning capacity. I was a toddler reading middle school books because she was adamant that I was going to be educated and I was going to be curious and I was going to have a vocabulary and I was going to understand story and words and creativity, and I was going to understand the bigness of God because I understood the bigness of how to write about him and the bigness of how to dive into the word at a young age. I had an amplified Bible when I was like 7 years old because she was like, you're not going to have one of those little kid Bibles with the pictures and stuff. And I understand the word and I have a love for the word because of her. I am an avid reader because of her. Writing is my biggest outlet because of her. I teach writing because of her. I love writing because I've sat in pretty much every writing school she's ever taught. And every time I go, I learn something new, even though I've probably gone to 500 of them over the course of my life, probably more than that. But I'm so, so grateful to know and to love and to sit under your tree. And to know and to love someone who, after 60 years of pouring out, you are still filling your well so that you can continue to water all of us.